A friend of mine told me, "I think you're more clear-eyed than I am about long-term threats to freedom-loving people." I try to be. I'm halfway through my time on this earth. Almost everything, maybe everything that I care about is viewed in light of the fact that I will die. Remember that you have to die. Memento mori. Teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Legacy is the thing to pursue. That is a chief value. Legacy means a life in which you always invest in yourself, invest in your children, invest in potential world changers. The goal is to help people's hearts. The most obvious way that you could maximize doing all of this is to work in ministry in some way. I tried doing that. I was a church staff member and a minister for 7 years. I spent 3 years in seminary because I care about other people's hearts and their eternal fate. And I care about the life that they have in this world. I care about men not doing stupid things like divorcing their wives and leaving their kids in a broken family. So I care about people's well-being in this life and also in the future. That's what pushed me into ministry in the first place. But in my time working in ministry, I realized there's only so much that I would be able to do. The evangelical publishing complex, the industry, has twisted its concept of what the Bible is teaching, and it pushes it down through the channels of information. And it twists pastors' understanding of what their job is and what the Bible is saying. There are systemic problems. Kind of like you talk about systemic injustice. Well, this is a systemic problem in Southern Baptist churches that I was in, but it's not just those, it's others as well. The problem is in how ministry is conceived. What standard do we hold the people to in the church? By what means? What level of clarity should a pastor speak as he teaches what the Bible says to his people? How can a pastor be faithful in his delivery of teaching week after week? I realized that there were problems related to how church organizations see themselves, how pastors see themselves, how leaders see themselves. And so ministry-minded people were hitting up against roadblocks, not able to do the work of growing God's kingdom to the extent that I thought was appropriate and biblical. Some of the problems had to do with how people understand the relationship between Christianity and politics. For example, should people in your church be voting for Democrats? And what should the response be if you know that that's the case? How do we understand the self? How do we understand motivation, morality? The kinds of things that we always talk about in the work that Jacob Brunton and I are doing now. And that's why we created this work. That's why we created this podcast. Some people have looked at what we're doing and they said, you guys are discernment ministry guys. You're trying to build an audience for yourself and an income for yourself by saying what you don't like about other people. We want to be in the ministry of spreading the truth. And sometimes that requires talking about other people. If you look at our content, the bulk of it is not really about other people, and it's not really attack dog stuff. It's mostly stuff about what we believe positively, what we want to teach positively. We want to teach Christians an understanding of society, of justice. And as I began to realize that I had unique insights in this because of my study of philosophy, because I had a sound understanding of philosophy, and I was one of the few people that do. Sorry, I know that sounds arrogant. It's just true. I'm one of the few people that understands Christian theology and sound philosophy at the same time. And I'm in a unique position to be able to help other people. And so, to help people, Jacob Brunton and I got together, we created FTNCI. This is For the New Christian Intellectual. It's a podcast. You can find it at christianintellectual.com. It's also a website, so we have blogs and the podcast and the video channel. Good churches require pastors to be well-equipped as men of truth and as men of principle. And when I was working as a music minister on staff at a church, I remember I was driving one day and the thought came to my mind, we do not have a principled approach to ministry. We do not have a principled approach to anything. And it made me frustrated. What am I supposed to do about that? Is there anything I can do about it? Should I write a book? Should I try to talk to people about it? And I realized first I was going to have to do the work myself. I was going to have to understand what principles are, what logic is, what thinking is, and how to apply principles and logic to questions of morality, questions of theology. I realized I needed a lot more work. So I spent thousands upon thousands of hours learning to understand belief systems. And then I went to seminary. And I found that the people at the seminary that were the professors hadn't done that. At least they had not done it very well. Because they were statists. They were incapable of thinking philosophically. They were ill-prepared, for the most part, for the work that they ought to have been teaching me how to do. I was disappointed. But I also understood that the obstacle is the way. And if I go to the top and I find that there's nothing there, perhaps there needs to be a new top. So good churches are going to require good leaders, good men. And the first thing I had to do was become one. I had to become someone who knew right from wrong and knew how to explain it. And that is not an easy thing for a young man who just grew up in a small town and decided that he wanted to become a writer in his 20s and had never really thought about those things, never really thought about communication, never thought much about becoming a theologian or a leader. And frankly, I wasn't ready for it. There were areas of my character that needed to grow. There were areas of my understanding, and that's still the case. But what I realized is I could do a grow with me and watch me grow type of a thing. And so why do you think that I'm walking around in a park recording a video without a professional microphone? Do you think it's because I can't afford it? It's because I want you to imitate what I'm doing. And I want anybody to be able to jump in and do it immediately. And so I try to do things that are reproducible. I'm modeling what I think anybody in their right mind ought to be doing. And I'm using a teleprompter app so that when I run out of ideas, it's on the screen there. I have words already written out for me. You can get that on your phone, on an iPhone. I think that more people ought to be doing exactly what I'm doing. And I don't think that you have to be amazing in order to do it effectively. But you do have to spend the thousands of hours learning what's right and wrong, true and false, getting a good philosophical foundation and a theological foundation so that when you put ideas out there, it's not junk. Anyway, I want there to be good churches. I want there to be good pastors, men who are well equipped to be men of truth, men of principle. I want it with all my heart, and I pray for it all the time, that this would be something that would happen in the world and that I would be able to take part, play a part in making it happen. And it's been a real uphill battle. It's not that hard to grow an audience and to make money if what you're doing is you're teaching other people how to do something like build a website or that kind of thing. But when it comes to trying to teach people how to think philosophically, if you don't already have a clout and a reputation, if you haven't already become an elite or an insider, people do not take what you're saying seriously. And some of it's my own fault, lack of communication finesse. Point though is, in the years that I put into this, I haven't received very much in the way of compensation monetarily or growth of audience. What I have done is I've identified a few people that are worth calling brother and sister. And you know who you are. And I've identified a larger circle of people that I don't know all that well, but that at least they have some affinity for what I'm saying to the point where they comment on it on social media. They'll send me an email, call me on the phone if they're facing a problem in their life. And I realized that's the kind of thing that Jesus was doing too. So if we want to have an impact, we should ask ourselves, why did Jesus have such a big impact? How can we do the kinds of things he was doing? And he consciously set about to collect followers. He wasn't shy about the fact that he was creating something. And we need to be following him in that too. We need to not be shy about the fact that we're creating something. So I have set out to equip men, and especially pastors, to be men of truth, men of principle. One of the ways that I've done that is by helping them edit their books. There's 3 books out there that specifically say in them, thanks for the help that Cody gave. And the 3 of the best books out there, dealing with how to be a man or how to confront the social justice, heresy, those kinds of things. There's one from A.D. Robles, one from Jeff Cleaver, and one from Colin Tristler. That's the kind of thing I want to do more of as I have time. Helping somebody else write their book is not the most profitable use of my time at this moment because it's pastors. I'm not going to charge them thousands and thousands. But I want to be doing that kind of work. That's what I'm passionate about. And I don't think that the people that I engage with on Twitter necessarily understand where I'm coming from on that. I think I probably rub people the wrong way a lot of the time. I own that. But that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm going to be pretty ruthless about figuring out ways to do it. And I don't mind ruffling feathers or blocking people if they're unpleasant. I have a project and I care about that project. I'm going to build it. So that's what we're doing at FTNCI. We are offering tools to make this easier for people if they want to become men of principle. Some of the praise that we've got at FTNCI has been, I don't always agree with everything you say, and I don't always agree with the way you say it, but you are the only people out there that are calling it correctly on all these different issues. You're the only people that are calling it correctly when people are pushing kinism or racism. And at the same time, you're calling it correctly when the Gospel Coalition is trying to preach wokeism. How many people will criticize both sides, even if it's their own friends? How many people will point out that Albert Mohler is a danger to the church and that John MacArthur is not even very active to the extent that he should be in pointing that out? Some people say, oh, you're just trying to build your audience by criticizing other people and stirring up emotions and stoking and stirring the pot and creating controversy. And I say, do you think that this is helping me? I spend money growing my audience, and then I tell them what I think and they unfollow me. They unsubscribe. They decide that they don't want to have me on their YouTube channel anymore. I mean, making friends, right? No, we're losing friends when we do this kind of thing, but we don't criticize people in order to grow an audience. We grow an audience in order that we can spread the truth, and sometimes that involves criticizing people. That's the integrated, manly way to think about it, and that's the way that I think about it. And if it makes it so that growing my audience is slow because I'm not pandering, that's okay. Perhaps God doesn't want me to have a big audience right now. Maybe I'm not ready for that. But one principle that I've been working from for about 8 years is this idea called the obstacle is the way. It's a Stoic principle. I think Marcus Aurelius might have pointed it out. There's a book by that name, I think. The obstacle is the way. The obstacle is the way. So what does that mean? Well, when you hit a roadblock, for example, you hit a roadblock in the fact that you don't really know how to grow influence. I mean, I'm not John Piper. I'm not John MacArthur. I'm not R.C. Sproul. I don't already have an influence like they have. What did they do? Or what does somebody in 2022 have to do in order to make a good impact in the world? That's a worthwhile question if you have a fire in your heart, right? So the roadblock is that the churches are not currently conduits of truth to the degree that they need to be because of misconceptions about God, especially about the self, about personal motivation, about socialism and its danger, and even about epistemology, like the precept versus classical debate. Churches simply are not conduits of truth to the extent that they should be. I thank God for the truth that has come to me through the church. I don't want to downplay that, but they're much less than they could be. And we know that in part because we see our friends falling away. That's one of the things that motivated me to start this in the first place. Seeing friends fall away, seeing someone very close to me abandon the faith because he got the message that Christianity was irrational and that it was just sort of a pop psychology movement in a seeker-sensitive church. So we hit a roadblock in our path. Well, what does that do? We can either stop and give up, change our expectations, change our goals, or we can say, no, I'm going around it. We redraw the route on the map and we go around the roadblock. In fact, we use that roadblock as a tool to instruct us in the new way that we should go. So if you find that church ministry is becoming futile, then identify the cause and then attack it. If you find that people are incapable of seeing the necessity of individual rights, well, identify the cause. Why do they not see the necessity of individual rights? Why do they not see that's a Christian principle? Identify the cause. Attack it. The cause isn't ethics. The cause isn't how people see the self, the personal motivation, rational egoism. Does the Bible, in fact, teach a man to store up treasures in heaven? Does it, in fact, teach a man that you should not be willing to lose your soul in order to gain the whole world? Does it, in fact, instruct us to seek personal values and to not feel ashamed of that, not feel that there's something sinful about that fact? Well, people cannot understand ethics often because they don't even have proper thinking methods. You bring up these topics of personal interest, holy self-interest, and people just put up their hands and say, I don't want to hear about that, because they don't know how to think logically. They don't know how to think in principle. Well, that's another roadblock, and it has instructed us that we must go further back. Identify the cause of their method of thought. Who taught them how to think? And how can we fix that? As we work to build for the New Christian Intellectual, we are tracing ideas to their roots. We are pointing out what a pursuit of truth looks like. I'll close with this. God willing, we can make the world a better place. I can, and you can. If I can hold up a camera and talk, you can too. Well, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to change the churches. We're going to change the culture. We're going to change the people. We're going to change the laws. And we're going to do all of this by first changing the mind. Before you can change somebody else's mind, you have to change your own. You're going to have to address the lies that you have come to believe. The lie that you are incapable of helping other people. The lie that you do not have the time or the skills. The lie that no one else will ever listen. The lie that it's not worth it. Are you kidding me? What else is there? You must be writing. You must be teaching. You must be making videos. You must be changing the world by teaching people how to think. What do you think God has called you to do? Take it seriously. I want you to imagine that you are that steward. I don't care if you were given 1, 2, or 5 talents. Ask yourself, what does God expect from you? What does your Lord expect from you? Go to Christian Intellectual if you want resources on how to do it. We have a lot of free stuff. We have tons of ideological stuff, but even stuff on how to grow your business, stuff on how to grow your empire of publishing, how to write more effectively. I want you to consume that material and get in touch with me if I can be of help to you. That is how we change the world. Thank you for listening. God bless.